Ladies and gentlemen, I have a book here that's published in April 2006, so we're a bit late. I got it for $1 at Strand Bookstore, New York City. Londonistan by Melanie Phillips. Londonistan was the nickname given to London after September 11th, 2001, when everyone was trying to crack down on Islam and figure out where all the Islamists were and such. And it was discovered that the British had been really tolerating the radical Muslims for a long time and placating them and allowing them to do their dirty deeds there. And Germany had a pocket of them, and there were pockets of them throughout Europe. But London was particularly thick with them, and it ended up being nicknamed by the French and German secret police people, you know, FBI, CIA types. It ended up being named Londonistan. So Melanie Phillips wrote this book about it. Now, I just have a few choice quotes from it. There's really, if you know very much about what's going on with the war against terror, and, you know, with how Europe is folding in and America's not doing its very best to fight it and so on. If you know that Europe is a basket case of multiculturalism where they won't even say that they're fighting against Islam, and you know that a United States president has said that this is not a war against Islam, it's a war against terror, if you know all that, then there's nothing really surprising in this book, especially since I'm 4 years late with the review. But there are a few choice quotes that I think are worth our time. On page XX, that's page 20 of the introduction, quote, let's talk about the degradation of the culture in London. Quote, Judaism and Christianity, the creeds that formed the bedrock of Western civilization, have been pushed aside and their place filled by a plethora of paranormal activities and cults. Pause for a second there. So she's talking about in London, the general culture of people. There's no longer a fascination with formal religion, Judaism, Christianity, but paranormal activities and cults are popular. Continuing. So prisoners are now allowed to practice paganism in their cells, using both wine and wands. Okay, you know, that's odd, that's bizarre. Freedom of religion maybe shouldn't extend that far to let them have wine and magical instruments, but let's continue. And this is the penultimate statement in the paragraph. A Royal Navy sailor was given the legal right to carry out satanic rituals and worship the devil aboard the frigate HMS Cumberland. Okay, we're getting a little too far now. I just want to mention as anecdotal evidence, perhaps it is, that this society that created this paragraph we just heard is the same society that created, or culture that created, or gave rise to Harry Potter. Okay? Same one. Take it if you will. I know a lot of you have read Harry Potter. I haven't. I know you have. I'm just giving you a heads up, that's all. And on the very next page, I just have a great little paragraph here. You know, there's deception and intimidation. The Muslims say, don't you call us terrorists, you're the one who are terrorists, and so on. Well, a lot of that was started by the whites, and the Muslims picked up on it and said, that's a good line, let's use that. So, quoting from the next page. So profound is the fear of being branded a racist among British liberals. So completely do they subscribe to the multicultural victim culture that the obvious examples of illogicality, untruths, and paranoia in much of Muslim discourse have never been challenged. Right? Much like in America, we say, yes, war on terror. It's not a war on Islam. Instead of attacking Islamic extremism, British liberals attacked Islamophobia. Instead of defending Britain against its attackers, they turned their rhetorical guns upon their own nation. Now, we even heard some of that in America, you know. After a couple weeks after the attack, the Democrats shut their traps for like 6 weeks after 9/11. But eventually, when they started talking again, it was all very polite, and a very few people mentioned that maybe this was our fault. But no one really dared say that in America. Well, what's his name was on the air saying it Jerry Falwell, I think, was on the air saying it just a few hours after the attacks, saying this was our fault. But by and large, respectable people didn't do it. Well, you couldn't have gotten that respectability in Europe. In Europe, a large crowd began very quickly saying America had this coming. So, our next quote that's worth our time, that I've chosen is worth our time, is page 33. And now we hear from a chairman of the Muslim Institute. So, a Muslim, he's in with the Muslims, but not necessarily in favor of terrorism and radical Islam. His name is Dr. GhayasusuddinsIddiqui. And he says about this ruling that was made in Britain, this ruling in favor of human rights. Now, we're all in favor of human rights. I like human rights, you like human rights. Well, so these people had a ruling in favor of human rights. And he says, the Muslim says this. He says, quote, "This may be a victory for human rights, but it is also a victory for fundamentalism." Now, I think at that point you have to check your premises and say, is it a victory for human rights, right? Because he's being sort of facetious. He's been a bit tongue-in-cheek. He's saying, you people are allowing fundamentalism to creep further and do more, even though you're supposedly trying to stop it with these court rulings that give lip service to human rights and stuff. If you would have found a human rights situation back in the 50s or 60s, 1960s Cold War era, when 1953, let's say, when Hungary had its revolt, and if you would have found American courts or whatever doing things that, in the name of human rights, that brought about communism in America, that would have seemed strange. Well, that's happening very explicitly in Britain. Very explicitly. And even moderate Muslims, of which there seem to be at least 2 or 3 on the planet, maybe up to 5, I've heard. Moderate Muslims are speaking out against this, even in Britain. And he may have lost his life for that. I don't know. It doesn't mention that here. Page 42. We'll just go a few pages more for our next quote. The Cold War ends. Seems like the end of history, like Fukuyama wrote. Everybody's done. 1994. What are we going to fight? The Muslim terrorist thing is seems like there's no reason to worry about that anymore. Everybody admits democracy's the way. What happens? MI5 disbanded G7, the unit that it ran jointly with the Foreign Intelligence Service MI6 to monitor Islamist terrorism. Disbanded it, just as it was getting rolling, just as it was picking up steam. Now it makes you wonder if somebody saw some evidence of this, and in the face of that evidence, not admitting to themselves what it was or something, I don't know. You know how dishonest people can be if you read about Toohey and the Fountainhead. Saw the evidence, and even though he knew disaster would possibly result, did what he did. I mean, throughout the 90s we were attacked. It was 1996 when the World Trade Centers were bombed the first time. I believe they tried in 1993, if I'm not mistaken. To disband Islamist terrorists, the Islamist terrorist study group in 1994 seems bizarre. And they had to put it together later, hastily, without all the expertise that they had built up over the years, which probably weren't worth shit anyways, I know, but how short-sighted of them, how short-sighted. Now we go to page 70. Now she's just gotten done with running down a bit, talking a bit about what the Muslim view is and stuff. She says, far from being the essence of British citizenship, these doctrines are in fact foreign to British identity. You know, the doctrine of we'll share the street with the Muslims and let the Muslims do as they please and we'll do as we please. Actually, British identity is founded instead on Christianity, she says. The common law and the history of an island people, of which both newcomers and indigenous citizens remain ignorant. So she's saying there's a problem with education. I'll just throw the attention to that. Now here's the British government's statement from the government's quote. Here, you ready for this? Race, Equity, Faith, and Cohesion Unit in the Home Office. Wow, I cannot believe that is not in a Kurt Vonnegut novel, and it probably is. The Race, Equality, Faith, and Cohesion Unit. Jesus God. This office has issued a statement that says that